All right. I'm here with Jackson Cole. Jackson, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a long time since we ran into each other at the Moab race, but been a while since we chatted for real.
Yeah. I don't know the last time we had a in-depth conversation about training and life. Yeah, but it was good to catch up with you in Moab. That was fun to
Yeah,
run into you there.
yeah. No, I was so excited to see you. And then your girlfriend Maya did really well as well, so it was cool to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, so I wanted to kind of just so I guess the gist of this podcast is, for instance, you're a very good mountain trail runner. Um, and so my goal is to see like how does someone get to be there? Like how does someone get to be where you're at, and like what kind of training does someone need to do to be able to do what you do? Or like what does it take?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I feel like a lot of people uh well, in trail running especially, it seems that a lot of people come into the sport from a lot of different backgrounds. And where I came to the sport was not from a mountain background at all. Like I wasn't a skier or a climber, didn't really hike or backpack. Um, I came from the running side of things, and so I think my path to the sport was a little different than a lot of people that I know that have had success in trail running. Came to the sport from like mountain biking or cycling was a really popular one. And I think there's a lot more correlation to hiking uphill or running fast uphill in cycling than there is to um, just plain running track and field cross country. It certainly correlates, but I think there's some like muscular differences there that yeah, we can dive deep into that. But
I feel like for years it's been like this. The feeling with track and field and marathon runners is that it translates really well, and most good runners assume that they would be a good mountain and trail runner.
uh-huh.
So is that the idea in the cycling world that like, oh, if I wanted to be a good trail runner, I could be, or if I wanted to be a good ultra runner, I could be?
Not necessarily. Um, I think it's just that people that come from cycling have like a natural ability. Their quads are really strong, so they have a lot of power to output when they're climbing uphill. Um, Yeah, I think cycling's probably a worse example, but I think like Nordic skiing to trail running seems to be really common. With like, you have this huge aerobic engine and you're like full body athlete. And I think in maybe the biggest correlation is that people who come from sports outside of just running have like a greater overall like athletic background, or they're just
Okay.
stronger in general. Whereas people that come from a pure running background, I think they're lacking in a few basic skills, like if there's um, like a really steep grade, if there's really steep descent, or um, even just basic things like if you do a trail race and it's in the mountains, you have to know how to layer properly, eat eat food while you run. And I think if you come from like cycling or Nordic skiing, those things are ingrained into you from an earlier age, or you're just used to that stuff. Whereas in running, it's like we would be doing a 20-mile long run in college and we wouldn't eat or drink anything. And like the weather wouldn't really change. Obviously, it would be cold or warm, but there wouldn't be this like constant fluctuation of temperature.
I want to ask you about in a bit. I want to ask you about the fueling a bit, because I remember when you so for anyone listening, we lived together for years, and along with our friend Sydney, and so when you and Sydney and I lived together, I remember so many times you going into the mountains for like 8 hours with a granola bar and like one soft flask.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about that, but yeah, like that's obviously changed with your approach, like as you've learned more about the sport.
Yeah, it's changed because I think now that I'm older, I'm less, things can go wrong in the mountains, and so you don't want to be left out there if you're stranded with no food. Um,
Right.
but then also it's just from like a training standpoint, you maybe there's a time and a place to run fasted or to not eat much, but you're just putting yourself in such a huge deficit and a hole if you don't eat what you train,
Hmm.
especially if you do a long, big day in the mountains. So yeah, I've learned you can't train at a high level and get away with not eating and fueling all the time,
Sure,
or at least
sure.
your like output is just so minimal. You could go for an 8 hour hike in the mountains, but that's not really going to translate to fast racing necessarily. So yeah, gotta eat.
And then you mentioned skiing as well. And like I know when you first got into mountain running, had you hadn't really skied much, had you?
No, I think I'd skied maybe once or twice in my life. But yeah, skiing is something since moving to Montana, that's been something I've really gotten into.
So how would you say, compared to the average mountain runner, are you now caught up in skiing, or do you still feel like some people have experience that you don't have, or might never have if they've had a lifetime of skiing?
Yeah, I think there are certain things, like, well, for instance, this past spring, I went to the Northern Cascades in Washington to do some backcountry skiing, and there were certain like things like skinning up a really steep couloir, like doing kick turns on a really steep couloir to me felt really foreign and weird. Where like the partner I was with was extremely competent, and while he maybe wasn't fitter than I was, he was able to like get me on that section because he could just efficiently switch back up this couloir where I was kind of like fumbling around with all my stuff and um yeah, I mean, I would say like just like skiing at a resort, I could like ski anything now and ski it okay. But when it comes to the real like mountain backcountry skiing style, I'm still like a total novice. Um,
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it's just so it takes years to get good at skiing, I think. And I also just have really skinny skis, so when it's deep and powdery skiing, I just like sink in and but yeah.
So I see.
So
It's like maybe a gear thing that you're
yeah.
like not wanting to fully invest in if you're more invested in running.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And I look at skiing as just a fitness boost in the winter more than like a activity that I want to be really good at. Um, yeah, I see things like, skiing and mountain biking are so gear dependent to be good at those sports that I find it too frustrating to like give a shit because it's like really lame if in order to be good at a sport you have to spend like 6K or something and then not only that, but get like, live in a mountain town and whatever else that goes into it. So yeah, for me, mountain running and running in general is just the best sport because the barrier to entry is so minimal compared to skiing and mountain biking and whatever else. Nordic skiing, yeah, it's all so expensive. I'm finding out it's like crazy how expensive all those sports are that every mountain runner seems to also on like a mountain bike and skis and stuff, and you're like, holy shit. Or
Yeah,
not every mountain rider, but everyone that lives in these mountain towns. It's like crazy how expensive those sports are. So
sure. Yeah.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so I asked you before we set this up, I asked you sort of like some of your accolades and things that you're proud of that you've done recently. Um, and so you mentioned like the Minotaur Sky Race, the Alyeska Cirque Series, some other skyrunning things. And those are all like really intense, steep mountain running, like really technical stuff. I thought it was really interesting that you left off that you were 26th at the World Mountain Running Champs in the
Yeah.
short trail.
Yeah.
And to me, it just kind of showed like what you find really interesting. So can you talk a little bit about like what is it about that more technical high mountain, like high alpine stuff that you like versus, I think you're a good ultra runner and I think you have a lot of potential there. But what is it about the more intense mountain stuff that you like?
I think for me it's just uh more natural sport. I think when I break down running, there's like there's road, track and field. It's all about like efficiency and fitness. And then there's trail running and ultra running, which I feel like are its own unique thing and in like trail running, mountain running, sky running, I think it should be that you're like in the mountains and it's an epic course. Because if I wanted to just run for fitness, I feel like I would just train for a road marathon or something. But when you get these really epic courses with cool ridge lines and steep descents and stuff, it takes um it's like more akin to there's like fast and light mountaineering kind of style of racing. And that's where the sport was sort of rooted from. Um, and so I just think I find those courses more interesting because it's just so different than a road marathon. I think there are a lot of like fast 50Ks in the States that are cool, like maybe especially like where you live and in the like southwest corner of the States. There are a lot of fast and runnable 50Ks, but I think for me, and maybe it's because I came from a collegiate running background as well, but I just wanted to do the opposite of that. I didn't want to race. Like I didn't want to do track workouts anymore. I didn't want to do threshold sessions on the road. I just wanted to run in the mountains. And so those races and that style of training is what interests me the most now. And so, yeah, I like those races just because they're so different to what I was used to in the past. And sort of like, in a way, what I was trying to get away from when I sort of chose the path of mountain running, trail running, was just something so different. And I think you get that as well in ultra running, just the nature of running for 100 miles is like so different than track and field and cross country. But
Sure.
um, I've
Yeah,
chosen
that's
the more like shorter, fast style of racing. So yeah.
right. I think that speaks a little bit about your personality. And I wonder, this kind of leads me to, I was going to ask you a bit about growing up in New Zealand, and then coming to the States when you were a teenager. Um, you always seem to be drawn to like, sort of like what most people are doing, right? Is if you call it like mainstream, and then you always seem to enjoy the like slightly alternative versions of that. So when I met you, you were like really into like skateboarding. We were all running, and you were like maybe a bigger skateboarding fan than you were a running fan at times.
Yeah.
And you always listen to like alternative music. And when we were all still super into track and cross country, you were getting into mountain running, right, and ultra running a little bit. And then as ultra running has kind of become more, it's becoming pretty like mainstream. I'm amazed at how many people know about the sport now. And you're finding yourself sort of in this slightly alternative track of mountain and ultra running, which just for, I mean, you could probably, I'd actually like you to talk a little bit about that. Might just be in the U.S. that sky running um, is like less known, and it's much bigger in Europe, and other parts of the world. But I guess I'd like to ask, what was your intro into running in New Zealand like, and then coming to the States? How did that change, or how was it similar, and how did that kind of set you up to be like, you're coming into high school in the U.S. and you're right away you're different because you're from a different country and you have an accent, and kids like to tease and just kind of like they notice those types of things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think part of the alternativeness comes from just living in Portland though. And yeah, it's like the classic Portland thing to do the opposite of what the trend is. So I think some of my beliefs are definitely rooted in just going to high school in Portland, Oregon. Um, but growing up in New Zealand part is kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought of that and how that's shaped my al- alternative style of doing things, maybe. But also, I think I also surround myself with so many people that I think like feel similarly to me in like the way that they move in the mountains and whatever else. And so I don't think like, and yeah, in Europe, like skyrunning is very mainstream. It's very normalized there, but in the US doesn't really exist. And so yeah, probably comes off as a bit more niche. And it definitely feels that way. Like when I talk about the races that I'm going to do or the people that I'm nervous to compete against in Europe, no one's ever heard of heard of these names.
Right.
In the
And that
States.
that also makes me think like do you think in terms of maybe like attracting sponsors or being able to get into larger races and things like that, do you think that skyrunning being less known, does that hurt you a little bit in the US? Because I've noticed like I'll look up the rankings of skyrunning, and you'll be sometimes like you'll be the only person from the entire Oceania region that's ranked.
Yeah.
And then you are often like even the only person living and training in North America in some of those races, and everyone else. Like I texted you recently about the race in Ireland that you did, and I forget, were you sixth place there?
No, I ended up getting eighth.
Eighth. Okay, and just about everyone in front of you was Spanish.
Yeah.
And I texted you and I was like, was there only Spaniards at this race or what's the deal? And you just explained to me that how popular it is there and how much people in Spain love those races and then and just in Europe in general.
Yeah, I think in Spain and in Italy, those two countries are like the powerhouse skyrunning countries. Um, and you get athletes from France and yeah, we're other parts of Europe that are also really competitive. But um, yeah, I don't, for whatever reason, Spain has like just like five of the best skyrunners in the world are from Spain. Um, I think it's just it's a cultural thing. Like some of the races there are some of the sky races there are really popular with the small towns. Like there's a race called Zagama that brings in this huge crowd of like thousands of people. Where you would never see that for like any race in the States. Even I think Western State 100, which is by far the biggest race in the US, probably wouldn't draw that big of a crowd of spectators. Um, it's a lot of people along the course for sure, but you wouldn't get like a crowd of 1,000 people like screaming for you along the course. So I don't know. I think it's where skyrunning originated was in Italy. Um, and so I guess it's where it started. It's like where it's most popular. Um, the people there are definitely treated like superstars. Um, there's a and I don't know. There isn't maybe I have no factual evidence for any of this, but what I heard was at the World Champs, the Spanish team were given like if they were in the top seven, they like if an individual athlete from the Spanish team placed in the top seven of any event at the World Champs, they're given like a 20,000 euro bonus from like I don't know the government or some running federation. Yeah, I mean, but it's funny just because it's the New Zealand team, we had to like pay for our own uniforms. So it's like the level of support's like so different.
Right. That I guess that I ran over my own question, but that brings me back to like if you were a Spanish or French citizen, um, like with your ability, would you already be like a fully sponsored, fully professional athlete that could live a life in Spain?
Maybe. I mean, that's hard to say. That's all hypothetical, and who knows? But I do know that I've thought about just living in Europe for like 5 months, as opposed to racing in the States and traveling to Europe just once a year. And I think that just because all of the most technical, all the biggest and most technical races are in Spain and Italy. And so I suppose if you want to like compete in those races regularly, make a name for yourself, make more, prize money and then like bonuses and stuff from your sponsor, it'd be far more lucrative for me to like live in Europe. Um, but I guess the challenge I've always been faced with is like I do enjoy living in the States and I do enjoy the component of having like wild places in the US where a lot of the spots in Europe that are really famous for their sky running are like really built up ski resorts. And there's trams and people hiking everywhere. It's just a different vibe over there. Um, and so, yeah, I guess maybe if I were to live in Europe, I'd have more success, like more like financial stability in my life. But I'm pretty happy to bum it in Montana and get to live the life that I currently have. I wouldn't trade it. Um, and it's also something that I don't think I want like like the fame or something sounds pretty weird. I don't think that would be like a fun life to be some sort of like celebrity trail runner or something.
Yeah, you've never struck me as someone who wants to be recognized on a run. um,
But
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then also, yeah, you sent me some videos of like some of your runs in Montana. Where I asked you, like, I right away asked you, like, dude, where is that? Because I want to go there. Like a 30-second clip you sent me. I can't imagine. Some of the places. You're probably one of the few people that has the ability to that lives up there and has the ability to get to some of the places that you get to.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but certainly like I think because I end up running in these places, I do see, or like in this short span of time that I've lived here, I've seen a lot of different peaks and been up a lot of different mountains just because it's a little more accessible when you are able to do some big run in the mountains. But yeah, to your like that video that I sent you was from a off of a peak in the Bitterroot Range, which is just to the south of Missoula. Um, and yeah, it's just an incredible place. It's so un unmaintained, not built up at all, really wild, really slow going. Um, but I appreciate that kind of stuff. And I think part of it is because when I got into mountain running, I was living in Alamosa in the San Luis Valley, and the Sangre de Cristos are like that. They're just this big wild mountain range that doesn't really, they're not built up at all, at least not in that section. Um, and so, yeah, I think that formulated my opinion of what like a mountain range should look like or be. And so the Bitterroots and a lot of the mountain ranges around Montana sort of fit that bill of being really wild. Um, and so you can kind of feel like you're way out there. If you go for like a 10-mile run into the Bitterroots, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. You might as well be in like Patagonia or something. It's awesome.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds that sounds awesome. I'd love to get up there.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you just in a bit about some of your Sangre FKTs as well. Um, but real quick, still on New Zealand, which some of the stuff you've said falls right into this. Can you talk about tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand
Yeah.
and how that
Yeah.
maybe affects your outlook a little bit?
Yeah. Tall poppy syndrome is just this classic thing that I think it doesn't seem to affect Australians as much, but New Zealanders aren't allowed to show any emotion when it comes to athletic achievements or kind of any achievement. You're supposed to be very like humble and accepting of everything that's, or yeah, humble, and you don't talk about your accomplishments. You certainly wouldn't say something to the effect of like, "Oh, I'm the best trail runner there is" or something. But um, yeah, tall poppy syndrome. I actually don't know where the saying comes from, but uh, yeah, it's a real faux pas to speak highly of yourself. Um, and so I suppose that certainly shaped me, but I think I do appreciate that because it's just I think especially in an age with social media, you get a lot of people who are pretty average at something, who boast about themselves and maybe inflate their own presence online. And it's really annoying because you don't like I know some people who are just incredible athletes and maybe they don't have social media or they haven't posted about some epic trip they did, but it's like just as badass and just as cool as like someone with 50,000 followers on Instagram did. But the person with 50,000 followers is going to get like all this attention and kudos and love online. But this person who's like a little more humble and low key doesn't get any credit. But like the small people in their community sort of know what they've done, which is cool in a way. But I just wish there was a little bit more credit giving to the people who are like truly doing rad stuff and less credit to the people who are just kind of like talking about the rad stuff they could do or whatever
Right.
else. And so,
I I think I mean you fall in the category I think of someone who if if you're listening, go follow Jackson on Strava. Some of your Strava stuff that you do, and you won't say much about it. And then when I actually get in there and look into the details of like the vert and the paces and like the descents that you're putting in, um, there's some nuts stuff on there that for you is like a Wednesday run, and just really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've lived in the States now for like 14 or 15 years. And so I feel like I've kind of lost some of that classic tall poppy syndrome stuff. And I would like be bold enough to say like, oh, I could totally beat that person in a race or or something like that, but I'm not yeah, I just think there are some people online who are like without naming names, there are just some folks who like claim to have done these rad things, and then you look into it a little bit and you're like, oh, that was super uncool, or like they didn't do this section of the ridge, or like they missed this peak or something. It's like that kind of thing really bugs me. But then there are the people who don't like talk about themselves at all, and their like style is really, really good, and they do things that are really incredible. But yeah, these like phonies online are saying that they're doing rad stuff and they're not. So yeah, it always bugs me. But
Right. You seem
that's
to,
how it
I,
goes.
I mean, you seem to surround yourself. The people that I've seen you run with it's, they're people that like everyone agrees is like, oh, that guy's like such a nice guy or such a friendly dude. It seems like you're pretty intentional about who you enjoy training with, who you enjoy running with,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. You got to be a good person. It doesn't matter how fast you are. You got to be a good person. Yeah,
Right. Can we talk a little bit about high school in Portland? Because I'm just curious, like a little bit. So you went to Adams State, where I also went, a very good running school. Um, how does someone in Portland learn about it, decide you want to go there, and then you ran well enough to go there?
yeah. I think I initially heard about Adams State either from like a Let's Run post, or it might have been the Flow Track. Oh, what was it called? They did like a video series on Adams State. I think 2 years before I went there.
Yeah, Chris Chavez did the like a driven. Was it
Driven, yeah,
driven? Yeah.
yeah. I think it was the Driven series. But back when Flow Track was cool. Um, yeah, they did that, and I remember watching it and thinking that was really cool. And I always kind of wanted to go to college somewhere in the Mountain West, like get out of the Pacific Northwest. Um, and Alamosa not only fit the bill of being a great running school, but it was also at high altitude, being at 7,500 feet. Um, I think at that time as well, there weren't any there weren't really any European runners who were crushing it like they are now. And it was mostly East African dominated back in like 2010, 2014 era. And so in my mind, I was like, well, if I want to be a better runner, I have to live at a higher altitude. And I think Aten, Kenya is at like roughly the same altitude as Alamosa. So to me, it was a no brainer. I was like, got to go to a school at high altitude. I wasn't academically doing super well in high school, so I wasn't going to get into or I wasn't going to be able to get like a scholarship to go to like NAU, or like maybe Montana State was on the list of schools I was looking at. Um, but yeah, Adams State they offered me financial aid. And so I was like, yep, that's the place I want to go. And uh, it's like, I think my junior year, I either like applied and got in or something, but I remember it was before my senior year. I'd already like committed to going to Adams State. Um,
Okay.
so I mean, and it's the only school that I applied to. Um, so yeah, it was an easy choice. I just felt like it was the spot to go, to achieve the dream of becoming a better runner. And I visited the year before, and I remember doing like a road trip from. I think I flew into Albuquerque and then drove up through Santa Fe to the San Luis Valley. And coming from Portland, where it was at the time really rainy and gloomy, going to see the San Luis Valley, and I think it was in April, and I just remember it was so sunny and nice and really, I mean, it's breathtaking if you've ever been to the San Luis Valley. incredible to look up at the 14,000-foot peak surrounding Alamosa. Um, so yeah, it was such an easy decision to go to Adams State, and I didn't want to like I don't really like living in cities, and so going to some major town wasn't interesting. So Alamosa fit the bill in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
sure.
that's I think that's a sentiment shared by a lot of people. I'm going to be talking to Sydney Gidabadai and Chris Mugridge as well, both from Adams, and both big running nerds, just
Hmm.
like you and I. And I
Yeah,
think a lot of people like that end up there. Um,
yeah. Which was one of the cooler. I mean, the coolest thing about Adams State was that everyone that was there wanted to be there for the same reason. And I haven't really. I mean, I've heard a lot of like my friends who went to bigger D1 schools or whatever else, and it just seemed like everyone was kind of there because they thought they should be, or that was like the right thing to do. But everyone that went to Adams State was like so hardcore, just wanted to train as hard as possible, and it was a really exciting and formative place to be. Yeah, yeah, there was
right.
some good
So
time.
I want to get into that real quick. Talk just for a minute about you ran like 4:17 for 1500 and 9:03 for 3K in high school. Um, for a lot of people, that would be like they would consider themselves a good runner if they did that. Maybe talk about just a little bit like what kind of training were you doing to get into that shape?
Um, in high school, it was. I remember getting injured a lot. But the year that I ran those times that winter, or though that was all my junior year. I was injured like my entire senior year. But it was the winter of my junior year. Um, I think I was running about 60 miles a week, which felt like a ton at the time. And I remember we had our coach was this awesome guy, Michael Donahue, and he had us running like we were just given a certain amount of minutes to run every day, and then we would run them at 7 minute miles, and like there's like no variation from that. And I remember being really into that kind of simple, structured style of training where I would just like if you ran for 60 minutes or if you ran for 70 minutes, you'd run 10 miles. And it was like really bread and butter pudding. We would do like a little stuff in the weight room, but I wasn't super stoked on that kind of stuff. And then the training we would do was like a lot of like every Friday we would do some sort of a tempo session. Um, or it was like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday there'd be some sort of workout. Some were like really easy, just like 200s. Some were really hard, was like, a all out 400 followed by 2K of tempo or something like that. Um, so it was a lot of intensity and then a lot of like relatively easy mileage surrounding all that intensity. Um, which I don't think now, like, being like 15 years removed from high school, um, I don't think that training really worked for me. And I think the more like the structure of Adams State's training was far better, where it was a little bit less intensity but much higher volume. That seemed to be something that I've carried on into trail running as well. Is that the higher like really high volume with little to sometimes no intensity each week is like far more uh seems to lead to greater results and a lot less injury for me.
Right.
Um,
Okay. I
yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit, like I said, just a little bit about Adams State. So you only really competed for Adams uh, for I think 2 years when you were in college, because of the injuries you kept dealing with, and that uh, seemed to be what kind of ultimately led you to mountain running.
Yeah, it was yeah, the first so I redshirted my freshman year, cross country and track. And then uh I felt like that year I had some like instant success because yeah, like in high school I was a 9 minute 3K runner, but then I ended up running like 25:0 something for the 8K that year in cross country, which I thought was crazy. I remember splitting like 15 something in the 5K en route to that 8K PR, and I remember being blown away that I could go from being a 9 minute 3K runner to running 25 minutes in the 8K in the span of a year. And so I was very, very much sold on the Adams State philosophy of training. And I think, so that was my like true freshman year, redshirt freshman year. So I wasn't competing for the team yet. Um, and yeah, it was like really cool to train with guys like Tabor Stevens and Matt Daniels. They were all seniors when I was a freshman. Um, and it felt like a really exciting time to be part of Adams State because they had won nationals the year before and they won nationals that year. Um, and so, yeah, I was like, this is the place to be. Yeah, I ended up meeting like Sydney, who was our roommate in college, but before you had gone to Adams State, I was living with Sydney and in the dorm rooms. And just having like a really good time. So yeah, it was awesome. And then going into freshman year or like my sophomore, like second year at Adams State, it's like instantly, uh, it was like up the ante. All of a sudden, you're doing more mileage. I think that freshman year, true freshman year at Adams State, I might have run maybe 80 miles is like the highest mileage week. And then all of a sudden it's like you're doing 100 plus miles right off the bat. You're like second year. Or at least I was because I was like too stubborn to take a day off or ask Coach Martin for some help or something. So I was just beating my head against the wall, training too hard. Um, and there were always glimpses of success. Like I remember you and we went down to California for Occidental. Um, I think that was my second year at Adams State. And that's where I
Yeah,
ran my
yeah,
5K PR. And so there were like glimpses of success, but it was always kind of like a good race followed by getting too amped up and then training too hard and being either injured or slightly overtrained for an extended period of time. Um, and I felt like after my first year at Adams State, I never really found that groove in training again, or it would come in waves. Like I might feel good for a little bit, but then maybe like a couple weeks in college classes were stressful and I wouldn't account for that and I would just train too hard through it all. And so, yeah, it ended up just leading to this Achilles injury that seemed to last for the better part of a year until I eventually just quit the team. Because it was tough. I think I just got to the point where I wasn't enjoying it anymore. It was this thing that, was the most important thing in my life that all of a sudden I wasn't able to run for almost a full year. And I would get glimpses of hope and then do a track workout and my Achilles would be busted again. And it was like mentally hard to go through that because I do think, like I was saying, if you go to Adams State, you really do care about running and it's like the thing that you're there for. And if that's taken away from you, Alamosa is a hard place to be if you're not running.
right. I've
There's
talked
nothing else
to,
to do.
yeah, my wife, Riley, was a swimmer there, and we've talked a lot about that. Like our experiences were just vastly different. Where I loved it. I worked hard the whole time. I just, had like tunnel vision the whole time. And her experience was like, this is not a very fun place to live. And, and, like the school expectations weren't that high. She didn't have that much fun. And like, meanwhile, like, even in times, like you and I talked about this recently, even in times when like training was not going that well for anyone in our house, those are some of the best memories. And just like we had so much fun. And just like, because it's like this bubble of people that everybody's working hard and everybody's, really cares like about the team and about each other. Um, so let's say like when training was going well and when you were enjoying yourself, what are some of those workouts that stand out to you, or even some things that you might still keep today?
um, I think the things that stand out to me the most were the Friday tempos that we would do. Um, there was definitely a correlation to how you felt on that Friday tempo and then how well you were able to sort of perform on the Sunday long run. There seemed to be like when I was flowing and training, it seemed to be that I could have this great tempo workout that wasn't too straining, and then you know, just have like a casual Saturday run, and then on Sunday be like stoked to run 18, 20 miles, however long it was. And we would always run those Sunday long runs hard. Like that's something that I remember quite vividly is that those were some of the hardest runs that I can or that I've just ever done, I think. They're so tough. Like the last 5 miles of those long runs are just so brutal sometimes. Because there was basically like another tempo session.
Right.
Um,
Can you give some detail of in the like a typical Friday threshold run, uh, what paces? Is it like continuous or broken up? I know we did both, but what did you
for
enjoy? And then on some of those Sunday runs, when you say you're running hard, like how fast are we running?
So it would be on Fridays we might do. Well, I remember doing. Well, it would always progress. So it was like freshman to senior year, you might add a mile every year that you get older. But um, from my recollection, it was sort of like the classic Friday would have been about a 6 mile tempo run. Um, and sometimes it was broken up, but more often than not, it was just a straight 6 mile tempo run. And for me, I think a good tempo, at up at altitude, was running in the like 5:20 to 5:30 range, maybe even a little slower, like 5:40 sometimes. It always depended on how washboarded out that road was, because I think that would always make a big difference. And then I remember when I would go home to Portland, Oregon for like winter break, I think I would tempo at like 5 minute pace at sea level pretty easily, and then come back up to Alamosa and be, yeah, sucking wind at like 5:30s. But we all knew that too, so we were stoked, or I was stoked running 5:30s for a 6 mile tempo run. Um, and I think the times when things weren't flowing very well, I was trying to push those tempo runs to like make up for a bad race performance or a bad workout on Tuesday or something like that. There's always this like level of competitiveness brought to those tempo runs that I think was sometimes a little unhelpful, but yeah, like yeah, good tempo run, like 6 miles, 5:30 pace, and then on Saturday we would do like a 70-minute easy run, usually somewhere around like 7 to 7:30 pace, and then that would be enough to fully recover, I guess. And then on Sunday, yeah, it would be. I think the more common distance for me at that time would have been somewhere between 16 and 18 miles, and it would always start out. We'd run as a group for the first 5 miles, and then we'd all stop, take a leak, take like a swig of water, and then it was just like then it was just game on. And the next, yeah, 10 to 15 miles was just brutal. Um, yeah, for whatever reason at that mark, that's when everyone just decided to go for it. And it was like an unspoken thing. You just after that 5 mile pee break, you just started to hammer. Um, and yeah, it was just it was really fun, and especially when you were just running like 6 minute pace for 10 miles with a group of 10 guys. That's awesome. It's such a good dynamic, and you know the banter stops, everyone kind of quiets up and just gets in this really cool rhythm for a long time. And there's always like some freshman that's hanging on for dear life, or it's you hanging on for dear life. And um, yeah, it was. I mean, it would have been impossible, I think, to train like that by yourself. There's no way I could have done that by myself. But when you have a group of 10 people, that was the first time, like the idea that a twig would snap, but if you get a bundle, it like doesn't break. That's the classic analogy, but it was so true at Adams when you'd get a group of 10 people running like that fast together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that analogy. That's really interesting. I'd never thought of it like that. Um, I do remember when I first moved there, my first or second long run, I was having some stomach issues, and I didn't realize that that was, like you said, like after 5 miles, it was like game on those long runs,
Yeah.
and I got absolutely left, and like I didn't even know how to get back, and I could just barely see. We would just do like a giant square for anyone who listening who
Yeah.
hasn't been there,
Yeah.
this big square out in the country roads, and all I could see was like someone off in the distance turning left, and so I just tried to follow and found my way back to campus.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was uh, super difficult, but so much fun. Um, I want to talk a little bit about when you first got into mountain running. You have some just awesome FKTs in the Sangres. Um, your, I believe it's probably your first FKT, and I think you still have it, but you've lowered it quite a bit, is just the Mount Blanca ascent. Do you want to talk about that
Mhm.
one a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that place really formulated a lot of um I think my strengths in as a mountain runner now. Um, because yeah, Blanca is a really, really rugged 14,000 foot peak in the Sangres. Um, and it's one of the, I think, tougher 14ers to climb just because it's unless you have a really, really souped up four-wheel drive vehicle, you can't make it very far up the road. So it's like a notorious road called Como Road that takes you up to an alpine lake at the base of Blanca Peak. And that was like, I don't know, there's always this lore around Blanca Peak, even on the team, because if you were running Tempo Road, for instance, you'd just be looking directly at Blanca Peak, and the like Sangre de Cristo range. But it was sort of this thing that everyone would talk about climbing in the summer. And then there was this guy on the climbing team who uh, ran Blanca Peak in like 2.5 hours. This guy Logan, and yeah, I remember he was talking shit to one of our teammates, and he was like, "Yeah, I think you got to be a climber to run fast up Blanca Peak because it's so technical and you're in the mountains and everything else." And being on like the running team, we're like, "What the hell? Like, no way! This climber can run faster than us." And so, um, yeah, it was the summer after like quitting the team, or maybe it was actually before I had even quit the team, but I was dealing with this Achilles injury, and so um I sort of like something to do to take my mind off of not being able to run was I decided to climb Blanca Peak. So it was like the first 14er I ever climbed. It was also the first mountain I ever climbed. And yeah, I did it and as like a run. I tried to run as much as I could, and I think I either broke Logan's time or was like really close to it. And that's sort of besides the point because the that like first experience was just so incredible. I was like hooked after that moment of being on top of the summit, and I remember it was in this like really thick cloud so you couldn't see anything, but to me that was just, yeah, it was so cool. It was such a wild experience. It was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Um, and then I remember coming back down and just being so wrecked afterwards. I remember going and getting a like barely making it back to Alamosa. It's like a 20-minute drive from the trailhead to get back to Alamosa, but I was like really struggling to find the energy to, I don't know, not fall asleep, or I was bonking really hard too, for sure. And because I think I'd only taken with me a peanut butter tortilla, which was like classic food for me back then. And yeah, I got a big burrito and a Coke and was just so satisfied with the accomplishment because it was sort of like the first thing I'd felt accomplished at in like quite a while because I'd been so injured and I wasn't PRing, I wasn't racing really. And so just the fact that I was able to climb this thing that seemed so mega was pretty awesome. And so yeah, I was like sold on it right after that moment. And then I remember doing a few more hikes slash runs in the Sangres. like in the following weeks before the season had started. Um, and yeah, I think it was is maybe after running the V Hill Invitational that I just decided I was going to quit the team because I just couldn't bear the fact to not be climbing in the mountains anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a similar story. So I don't know if you remember this, like right around the time that you had either just set that FKT up Blanca, or you were about to. And Sydney and I we were like, oh, wouldn't it be funny to like, and same thing, being like, we're deep, like Sydney had just ran 13:30 for 5K. I'd ran 30 minutes in the 10K, which I thought was pretty good at the time. And so we were like, we could easily just go, and it was either like take Jackson's record or beat him to it, and it would just be like silly and fun. And we had a similar approach. We started out, we had 30 ounces of water to share, and a pack of like neon gummy worms to share. We were like, it's like 2.5 hours up. We're going to do it in 2 hours. We'll be back down in an hour. We don't need much.
Yeah.
And I think it was like not even 3 miles into the climb up Lake Como Road. Um, and Sydney, he was lagging behind, and he's never loved running uphill. And so, and he was like lagging behind, and he was like, "Yeah, dude, you go ahead. I'm just hiking this." And I was like, "I can still do it." And it was not even a mile later. We both just completely imploded within an hour.
Yeah.
Um, and then we still were like, well, we'd still like to summit it. Maybe we could get close to the time. And we basically hiked, and we got off trail somewhere near the top because the switchbacks had some ice on it, so we couldn't see the trail. And we were like, before we know it, scrambling on the side of this cliff, and it was totally unsafe. And yeah, we can see the summit above us, like 200 feet above us, and we can't figure out how to get there. It was like a 9 hour round trip day with this guy hiking saw us and saw that we didn't have any water and forced us to take some of his water.
Uh-huh.
And it was just like by the end, we were limping back to the car at the road at the bottom. Like I had tears in my eyes because my feet hurt so bad from the rocks on that road. And like we wore, of course, like I was wearing like the New Balance Prism, which was like their like discount trainer. Just so we were like so unprepared. It was just we had the complete opposite experience that you had. Um,
Yeah.
and and I remember like it it forced us to give a little bit of respect to mountain and trail runners, which we like didn't really have at the time. Like you said, we were like, oh, if Logan can climb this fast, like we're much far better athletes. That was kind of our attitude.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, it made me realize then, like, oh, like it's a different sport, and these people are pretty good at what they do. Um, but it was just like, anyways, and like for those listening, you've now ran under 2 hours on that ascent. I bet my guess is do you think you could do it faster even now? You just haven't been back there in a while.
I think so. Yeah. I'm definitely much fitter than I was back then, but at the same time, I was so incredibly motivated to break 2 hours on the climb that I don't know. Uh, I remember looking back at some heart rate data and seeing that I was like, I think for 90 minutes of that 2 hours, my heart rate was above 170, which is pretty high. I think I have a max heart rate of like 195 ballpark, give or take. Um, so yeah, I think part of it would maybe I could run faster now, but I don't know that I could push myself to do that climb unless someone was to break my own record. I don't know that I would find the motivation to go really hard up there because it's a long way to suffer. You got to really want it, I think, for a mountain like that.
Which can you talk a little bit about, um, like some of you've done some really cool FKTs like in the Sangres. Like, what are a couple of your like favorites or most proud ones, and how did you kind of train for those kinds of efforts?
I think the one that stands out the most is the Crestone Fortina Traverse, so that nine there are nine Fortinas in the Sangre de Cristo range, and they're kind of clumped into these two separate groups. So there's like the Blanca Massif that has four of them, and then the Crestone group that has five of them. And um, yeah, the Crestone 14er Traverse is just you link the five 14,000 foot peaks in that Crestone group. And it's pretty technical. There's some climbing involved that's like moderate, like fifth class scrambling. Um, but yeah, basically, there was a guy, uh, Eric Lee, who sort of like a um, well-renowned climber, scrambler, just all-around mountain runner outside of Boulder, or he lives in Boulder. And he had this FKT on the Crestone 14er Traverse, and he ran it in like 8 hours 50 minutes or something like that. And he had this cool blog write up on 14ers.com that I remember reading, and I just thought that was really cool. Like the idea of climbing those five peaks in a single day seemed pretty exciting to me. And it was an area that I had been into quite often, like the outside of the town of Crestone, you can run up this trail called the Willow Lakes Trail, which I know we've done before together. I think we even did it as like a Wednesday mountain run one summer with our assistant coach Clayton took us up
Yeah,
there.
I
Uh,
remember going up to Willow Lake, and we thought it would be like a 90-minute round trip run, and it took about
yeah, it
3 hours.
took yeah. So I'd been up there plenty of times, and I'd climbed a couple of those mountains. But yeah, I don't know. One summer day, I was just motivated enough to drive out there the night before, and I camped out, and then just um went to try and break his record. So this was in 2018, and I had been running in the mountains for like less than a year at this point. And so I definitely got a little bit in over my head during that like FKT attempt trying to break Eric Lee's time. Because I'd never climbed the Crestone Peak or the Crestone Needle, which are like the two most technical peaks in that range, that are 14,000 foot summits. And I remember getting disoriented, kind of lost, and just yeah, generally had a bit of an epic. And Anyway, it was like a fun experience. And I remember I did end up breaking his time by like maybe 20, 15 or 20 minutes or so. And I was really stoked on that. But um, I knew like I could go faster like one day. I just needed to dial in the route a little bit, tweak the route. And so over the next 3 years, I spent a bunch of time in that range, climbing those peaks and getting familiar with it. And then I went back in the summer of 2020 and did it and did the link up in 6.5 hours. And then yeah, I was like blown away that I could do it that quickly. And it was cool to see the progression of like doing it for the first time, getting lost on route, being kind of freaked out in certain sections to the point where I felt really comfortable on the route and did it relatively quickly. Uh, and I just think that route is very aesthetic. It's like almost a perfect loop of the five peaks, and it involves trail running, scrambling, um, some good route finding skills. It's like sort of this all encompassing classic like day in the mountains. So yeah, that's the thing that sticks out the most to me. And yeah, this is a also a call to action for mountain runners to go after that time because I think it's fun to project that route in particular, and it's such a cool area. The Crestones, and actually, Killian, when he was doing his like project of the US 14,000 foot peaks, he climbed and did the Crestones Traverse, and he said it was the coolest mountain range in Colorado. So if it's good enough for Killian, it's good enough for anyone else.
um, so for that, all I remember, so we were living together at the time, or maybe we were you're still living in Alamosa when I lived there, and we're training for some of that stuff. I just remember you spending like all day in the mountains. Was that essentially your training for things like that? Just like being out there all day and like really long, slow volume in the mountains?
Yeah, at that time especially, that's sort of all I was doing. Um, like, yeah, big days where I would have some mapped out big ridgeline traverse or something, or just wanted to go scramble up a summit. And yeah, I would. I think yeah, between like 5 and 7 hours was like a pretty typical mountain run for me in the Sangres. Uh, and yeah, it was like fun, but I don't think it correlated to race results at all. That was very specific time when I was just doing big days in the mountains with like a specific goal of wanting to, like at the time, I remember a big goal of mine was to climb the Grand Teton in Wyoming. And so I was just doing at that time a lot of scrambling, a lot of big days in the mountains. I remember doing some like 30-hour weeks, but it was all very slow, a lot of hiking involved. Um, and conveniently, it was like pandemic, so there were no races anyway. But if I had tried to race, I would have been pretty slow at that time. But it was, yeah, really fun just to project those things, just trying to get really comfortable with scrambling, especially because a traverse like that does require some not only up climbing some fifth class, but down climbing fifth class terrain to do it in the most like efficient, aesthetic way. So yeah, it was just a lot of time in the mountains and pretty formative. Like I think a lot of the reason that I do okay at some of the races in Europe that are really technical are because of the time that I spent in the Creststones, scrambling and being comfortable on exposed ridge lines and stuff like that. I think if I had lived in like Boulder even or Leadville or a more popular mountain town, I don't think I would have gotten as good at scrambling because I would have been running like Mount Elbert or something all the time, as opposed to getting up into the Sangres, which sort of requires you to scramble. There aren't many peaks in the Sangres that are just like hikes. There's a lot more involved to them. So yeah, it was a formative time and something I look back on really fondly.
Yeah, I remember you started to mention like when you quit the Adams State team to kind of pursue some of that. I don't know if you remember this. I was like negative voice of reason for you because I remember I encouraged you. I was like, dude, like running on the team, like being a part of a team is the best thing you can do. Like you're gonna get healthy. You're gonna like you can run faster on the track. And I discouraged you from going to the mountains, and I was so very wrong because it's turned out really well for you. Um,
Yeah. Well, I think too, I mean, you're definitely right in that I could have stayed on the team and gotten faster. And like, I'm sure inevitably, eventually I would have gotten healthy and maybe stayed healthy and had like a good experience. But yeah, it was like you might as well have been talking to a brick wall because I was so adamant on not doing that anymore. Yeah, I definitely made up my mind at that point. But yeah,
yeah, well, I'm glad you did what you did. You've done some like just really cool stuff in the mountains that a lot of people don't get to experience. Um, can you So for anyone listening who doesn't know what an FKT is, um, can you kind of just briefly explain what an FKT is, and then maybe give a little bit of insight about how you feel about how that is in the sport right now?
yeah. So an FKT just stands for fastest known time. Um, Essentially, it's an FKT is just a speed record on a particular route or a mountain. So it can be there's a lot of variance to what an FKT can be, but generally it is in the mountains and it's some sort of there's a mountain like who's been up and down the fastest. That's the FKT, and it's called fastest known time because it's sort of a bold thing to claim that your time is the fastest without, you know, there were definitely times when people were running really fast in the 70s and 80s without GPS watches and no internet to post about what they did online. So it's sort of a fastest known time because it's the fastest thing that anyone shared online, maybe. But um, I feel like there's a pretty reasonable assumption that any FKT is actually the fastest time, but you never really know. So anyway, that's what FKT sort of stands for, and that's what it means. And yeah, now in the trail running world, it's become very popular because there are certain routes, like for instance in the Grand Canyon, there's this really, Jim Walmsley's the most, one of the most famous trail runners in the world, arguably the best trail runner in the world right now, and he has the FKT on the rim to rim to rim in like 5 hours and 56 minutes or something. So um, it's yeah, it's like this cool thing because there could never be a race in the Grand Canyon because it's a national park and strict wilderness restrictions. But his time is like, really fast runners have gone after his time. He has the record. It's like a cool, fun thing for people to do to like sort of like quote unquote race on something that will never be an actual race. So there are really famous ones like the Grand Teton has an FKT, Mont Blanc in France, like Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, um, the just like big loops, sort of for almost at this point any mountain in like Colorado probably has an FKT on it. So yeah, that was something that I was really into um, a little bit earlier on in my trail running career or whatever you want to call it. Um, just because it was really accessible. You don't have to pay an entry fee to do an FKT. You just go and do it. Um, and it was kind of exciting. Like you could just cherry pick and choose the things that seemed the coolest to you. Um, and one thing that's unique about FKTs in the United States is that they'll in Europe you can get these really epic mountain racing courses, but in the US, a lot of the most epic mountain ranges are designated wilderness or they're a national park. And so you'll never get a race through a wilderness area, at least not anymore. And so that's sort of a cool thing about FKTs is that there could be this really cool route that um, will never be a race, but you could set an FKT for it, and then other people can come and try to break it. And yeah, a place like Colorado is pretty awesome for that kind of thing because there's so many FKTs and so many great runners that have run on run on those mountains and set fast times. Um, so yeah, that's FKT, and it's a fun part of the sport. But I feel like it's gotten a little bit to the point where now like sponsors have gotten involved with FKTs, and there are a few more like rules and restrictions around it. So I think the maybe more old school hardcore style of FKTs has kind of been lost in replacement for a little bit of a dumbed down version of what it used to be. And now Outside Magazine owns the FKT website, um, which is just like a terrible sell. Like it's not the same as it used to be. It used to be run by these cool people outside of Boulder. Um, and now that it's owned by some mega corporation, I think it's lost a bit of its soul. So yeah, FKTs are still cool, but I try to refer to them as speed records, and I don't use the FKT slogan anymore. Yeah,
Okay, that's good to know. That's some insight I didn't know. I was just on the FKT website, checking out some of your speed records, and
yeah,
and um, if you're listening, you're interested in that, you can go like some of the stuff Jackson's done is really cool on there. Um, but yeah, I can see how uh, just like probably a lot of things in the sport, like as professionalization becomes a thing, some of the things that make it like pure and really fun and just really like about running and moving fast, kind of, it gets a little washed down.
Yeah. And I think like professionalization and sponsors coming into the sport is awesome when it's in the context of like a race or something that was already pretty big. But I just think something like a speed record in the mountains doesn't need to be as built up as it sort of became. Um, yeah. But yeah, these are also just my opinions. I definitely don't speak for the majority of people. So yeah, a
Right.
lot of
It's
people still like the FKT and are uh, still really stoked on it. I just yeah, personally, I don't think it's the path that it's kind of gone down since COVID is a little bit less true to what I knew it to be when I first started. And I'm kind of holding on to those prior beliefs because I thought it was really cool, and that's sort of why I got into the sport. And I worry now that like if I were getting into the sport right now, I don't know that I would feel as excited about it. Just because it seems a little bit more it seems really similar to like track and field. Like if you were to run a UTMB race, it's probably or like road running. Like if you were to run a UTMB race, it probably has a really similar vibe now to a like a road marathon, being like that it's a built up event and everything. Um, Whereas I think when I was first getting into trail running, I needed it to be totally different from like what I'd been used to at Adams State. Because I was like, this thing broke my heart. It broke my Achilles in my heart. And so I wanted something that was totally different. Um, I hope that like there's still some niche side of the sport that's out there that someone could get stoked on. But yeah, one of my worries is that like niche hardcore style of trail running is slowly dying and being purchased by Outside Magazine and the North Face and whatever other company. But I'm also profiting from it, so who am I to speak?
right, right.
Yeah.
I think that's like an age old struggle with sport. I mean, you're doing all sorts of cool stuff now. Like you've done really well in sky running. Um, like I said, you placed 26th at the short course at World Champs. You were the first New Zealander. Um, and I don't know if you're not someone who like puts a lot of stuff out online. And so I don't know if people know that like all of your nutrition and gear didn't arrive in Spain for the World Champs, and so
Mm.
you were competing at a bit of a handicap.
Yeah, that was very frustrating. Because I got out to the World Champs. Well, first I was really rushed when I was leaving the States to fly to Europe. I'd just run the rut and I was driving back from Bozeman to Missoula the day that I flew out to fly to Europe. And anyway, I like wasn't packed to leave, and so I had like a 1 hour window to pack all my stuff until I flew out of Missoula. And I just basically didn't pack my racing gear in my carry-on. So all that stuff was on my checked bag or in my checked bag. And so yeah, I arrived to London, and my bag just never showed up. And I was like, oh, that sucks. So I filled out the like British Airways lost luggage claim, and I had I think I was there for like 2 weeks before the race, so I had plenty of time, and I didn't think it'd be an issue. And I thought my bag would come, um, but yeah, long story short, it got like locked up at customs in Madrid, and I didn't get my bag with all my race kit until it came the day after I raced, which was kind of a slap in the face. But I was able to um, piece stuff together just from teammates that were like racing different races. Unfortunately, there was a lot of required gear or mandatory gear for this race, and so yeah, it did mean I had to use a bunch of stuff that I wasn't used to. And that included my nutrition. And so I ended up buying a bunch of gels from a running store in Spain, and it was this. Spanish company they basically just sold these 60-gram gels, which I was like, sweet, that'll be perfect. I'll just grab a bunch of these. And yeah, basically I had never taken more than a 30-gram gel before. And so I think what like someone explained to me after the fact was that if you all of a sudden, especially like in a race environment, take like double the amount of nutrition you're used to, your stomach can't really handle that volume of carbs all of a sudden. So I ended up getting just felt bad, I suppose, the whole race. But it was one of those things that you're racing for, your country, and I think I was able to grit it out a little bit more. Anytime that I felt sorry for myself, I was able to kind of put myself back in the race and keep going. But yeah, just really frustrating to deal with that because you only get so many chances to race at the World Championships. And I was in really good shape, I thought. So yeah, it was a little frustrating because I thought I could maybe place in the top 10 on a really great day. But didn't happen. In hindsight, I'm happy with 26th, but yeah, I don't know. Who knows if it would have been better if I had all my stuff, but um, yeah, it was just like an annoying situation, but I think I made the most of it. Yeah, it was
Right.
good practice.
I think you'll be back. I think you'll be
Yeah,
back at World Champs.
yeah,
Um, and so not to bring up another maybe negative experience, although I saw it as pretty positive for you. Um, the Canyons 100K. So Francesco Pupi won it, and I think some people would consider it his win like maybe one of the trail performances of the year, or maybe the best performance of the year in the States, probably. Um, I don't think so. So the live feed was kind of hard to follow at the start. I don't know if how many people realize that you led. So, like watching Francesco, people are like, "Wow, he went out insanely fast." Um, you were ahead of him for 38 miles of that race, um, and
cool.
so maybe talk about that. I mean, I was following along, and so the day before the race, I looked at the weather. I knew you were racing it. I saw that it was going to be like really rainy, and I was like, this is, I knew you're, from New Zealand and Portland. I was like, this is just perfect for Jackson. He's been training in Missoula. I'd seen some of your training runs on Strava were pretty nuts. Um, and so as I'm following along the live results, I was like, Jackson's having the day of his life. Like he's about to enter the world as like one of the best ultra runners. Um, and I don't even know if you consider yourself an ultra runner because you love the mountains so much. So I guess just talk about that race.
Yeah, yeah, that was a really cool experience. Yeah, I guess um I'd always wanted to run 100K, and Canyon sort of fit the bill because it was early enough in the season that it wasn't going to affect any of the later races I had planned that were all sky running, mountain running races. Because Canyons was in mid April or early April time frame. Um, so anyway, I had like a good time training for it. A guy that lives in Missoula, Jeff McGavero, was racing the 100K as well. And so I trained a lot with him leading up to it. And he ended up getting fourth at Western States this year. So he's like a great training partner, and he's a really, really great ultra runner. As well as Adam Peterman lives in Missoula, and I trained with him a lot. So I felt really confident going into the race because I had been training with those guys. At least every Sunday, we would do a long run together of like 30 miles or so. Um, so yeah, I felt good about it. Going into it, I like one thing that popped up was my Achilles started to flare up probably a month out from the Canyons 100K. Um, so actually I think the week before Canyons, I wasn't able to run, and I ended up just driving out to Mazama, Washington, and doing a bunch of ski mountaineering. Um, because I couldn't run. My Achilles was too jacked up. Um, and I was like, well, it's, taper week. So, um, like, I don't really, like, all the work is already done. I just need to keep training and stay off my Achilles basically in hopes that it would come right on race day. Um, which I think it did. Like, I started the race and didn't feel too bad. But uh, yeah, I guess I'll like give you like a rundown of the race and like the mistakes I made because there were several. I started out with like this group of 5 or 6 people. We were running down a road pretty fast, and then so the first like 6 miles of canyons, it's just kind of like on a winding downhill like road and trail. So that was like pretty mellow, and I was just running with the front group. And then there's a really steep mile descent that you drop like 2,000 feet, and I think like a mile and a half or something. So it's quite steep. You drop down into this river, and then you turn around and come back up. And that's like 10 miles ish into the race. And um, I remember we passed the first aid station, and like a couple people stopped to get water, or like electrolyte mix or whatever else. And I remember just all of a sudden I was in first place because I didn't stop. And I was like, well, uh, no one's behind me. I felt great. And then I just descended like down into this canyon. And descending is definitely the like strongest part of my racing. And yeah, I just found myself with like a few minute gap on the field. Um, because I remember turning around, you do an out and back at that point, and I turned around and I remember running up like a few switchbacks, and I was like, holy shit, like I've got a lead on, you know, Poopy and Jeff and yeah, like a whole slew. It was a really packed field of people. Um, but I felt great and I was like, okay, I guess this is where I'm at. It was definitely not the plan to go out and lead the race that early on. So it was like a little, like, felt a little bit out there to be so far ahead that early on, knowing that I had 40 miles of racing ahead of me. Um, and some of the biggest errors I made were in nutrition. I just had a flask of maple syrup, and that was my nutrition strategy, um, which in hindsight was not a great idea. Um, I was able to take it down really easily, so that wasn't an issue, but I know there's like the idea that you want multiple carb sources from your nutrition, which was not happening for me. And I remember I got to the first like major aid station, in my crew, who was an old teammate of ours, Noelle. She had never crewed anyone before, and I got there in first place, and it was all like packed of adrenaline and everything. And I was like, we just hadn't discussed the like transitions and like how to swap things over. And so I got there with I think like a few minutes lead on Francesco, and by the time I'd like gotten everything that I needed, like I needed salt pills, but they were in a bag that was like down the road that Noelle didn't have with her, like stuff like that. So it wasn't very efficient. And then I lost all that time on him, and we ran out of the aid station together, and then he just went on to run like an incredible time. But yeah,
At what mile was that?
that was the first aid station at mile. I think it was a marathon, so mile
Okay.
26 or
So
so.
you led for basically a marathon, and then you dropped at about mile 38.
Yeah, so then I was in second place basically until Forest Hill, which was the next major aid station. That was mile 30. I think that was right around halfway, so it must have been mile 30 or so. Um, and at that point I was still in second place, but I was definitely starting to feel it, like feeling some fatigue. And I felt fine. I just remember saying to my crew, like, feel fine, but like I can't believe that I've only gone halfway in this race. Um, and at that point, I'd never raced anything longer than a 50K, so it felt a bit intimidating to feel like fine, but just tired with a full 30 miles of racing ahead of me. Um, and then the wheels just slowly fell off. Hans Troyer passed me, and then Jeff passed me eventually. Um, and I think it was just a combo of like feeling really fatigued and a little defeated that people were passing me that like quickly. And at this point too, the race goes from quite mountainous to the last 30 miles are very, very flat compared to the first half. So I felt like my strengths were gone and I was feeling fatigued and then just sipping down this maple syrup. And at one point, I had like a 250 ml soft flask of maple syrup that I like accidentally spilled all over me. And so my pants or my shorts were really sticky. That was really gross. Um, and then yeah, who knows? I mean, it ended up being like I couldn't run anymore, and my Achilles was really jacked up for a while afterwards. I don't know if that's more like a mental result, like if that's something that I kind of manifested because I was just like so done with it. Um, but yeah, I ended up dropping out at mile 38 or whatever that third major aid station is. Yeah, just super defeated. I was a rude awakening to the ultra running scene, and I have a lot of respect for those. A lot more respect. I think I went into it with kind of this attitude of I'm really fit. I don't know how I'll do at 100K, but I think I'll do really well. To being like, oh, I need to. If I were to do well at a race like that, I would need to train so differently. Um, and yeah, it did make me think that maybe I would do a race like that again, but for the meantime, I just want to focus on the mountain running because it's what gets me out the door and gets me excited to train. Um, I think I struggle a little bit more with training for a race that requires a lot more running economy. Just not quite as interested in it. Um, so yeah,
Sure. Well,
but it was
I
fun. Yeah,
I think if you go back, you'll do quite well just having the experience.
yeah.
Um, I listened to an interview with Francesco. I'm not sure if he even knew for a while that you were in front of him. Like because you had that lead, like it seemed like almost no one knew you were leading. Um, and anyways, I was super impressed. And then same with your your performance at the World Champs. Like I think you could do really well in the ultra running stuff. Um, so about the mountain running, like I guess can you talk a little bit? I kind of have like almost like a speed round of questions. I'd like to, if you want to just give us a little bit of background about what you're doing. So like overall training, like training volume, training philosophy, what are you doing right now for the mountains?
Um, so right now, well, being the winter, it's sort of a like base building block again. So, um, I'm doing a lot of skiing. If there's snow, it's been pretty warm here, so that's hasn't really been the case. But I suppose just to put metrics on it, it's like usually, um, well, okay. So every year I try to set like a volume goal, and this past year it was 1,000 hours and like 1.5 million feet of vertical gain. And I ended up, I think I'll end the year around like 900 and something hours of training. Um, and then I think I'll hit the vert goal. Um, but that is like 20, sort of averages out to about 20 hours a week of training volume. Um,
Dude,
so in summer,
1.5 million is that's incredible. Like that's that's like 4,000, 5,000 feet a day.
hmm yeah, I think it averages out to like 30,000 feet a week ish, but there's a lot of variance to that because a lot of those hours sometimes are from cycling. In the winter when I'm skiing, it's really easy to rack up vertical gain and do a lot of hours. Um, I think for like a runner to hear that like, oh, 20 hours of training or 25 hours of training is so much. But when you're doing it on skis, it's pretty easy. You just need like the time to do it basically. Um, and then in the summer, it's like a normal summer week of training would be closer to like 18 hours and then 30,000 feet of climbing. Where in the winter with skimo, it's like 30 hours with maybe like 40 to 50,000 feet of climbing. So there's a lot of variance, and it like averages out to about 20 hours a week throughout the year. Um,
So, are you doing any type of weights or strength training?
no, no, none. That's because I think I end up doing so much like vertical gain in my training that I stay pretty healthy, and because it's such like one thing that I noticed when I was training for the Canyons 100K when I was running a lot more was that like my Achilles did get kind of jacked up, and other areas of my body were kind of sore. Whereas when I train for these big mountain races, you end up doing so much more hiking and scrambling, and so the impact on your body is so much lower. So yeah, I've avoided the weight room completely in the last I don't know, 5 years or so. Um,
Imagine, like you said, like the skiing, and then I've been on some runs with you where you just leave me in the dust on a downhill with a ton of rocks. Like I imagine that's as good as plenty of squats and deadlifts sometimes.
yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's probably if I were to like have a new progression in my training, it would be adding weight room stuff now because I think I'm getting close to maxing out on the amount of volume that I can handle. With like also leading a relatively normal life. And so I don't know that I could add like 10 more hours to my training week, but I could certainly add 5 hours of gym sessions. So yeah,
Right.
it's not something I'm against. I just don't think I haven't really found the desire or need to do it just yet. But I do think it's something I might implement at some point soon. We'll see. I also really dislike doing stuff in the weight room, so that adds to it.
Yeah. Um, how are you doing long runs? Like let's say for when you're training for world champs short course,
Yeah.
what did a long run look like?
A long run would typically be um, somewhere between 4 and 5 hours. Uh, and I would typically try to find, when I was training for Worlds, I was finding something a little more runnable. So I would do like a 20-mile long run with 4 to 5,000 feet of climbing, some big loop in the Alpine. Um, Yeah, something like that. When I'm training for sky running races, I usually don't do any long runs. I just go out and climb a mountain or something, and then do a few more sessions, like a little bit more threshold based stuff, climbs. But yeah, training for Worlds specifically, because that was I mean, they call it short course, but that course it took me 5.5 hours, and it was about a marathon in distance with 12,000 feet of climbing. So it's like burly race, definitely more like an ultra than anything else. So yeah, for that race in particular, I was doing some longer runs, but it was also just tough because I was racing almost every other weekend, and so um, just with uh like some sponsorship commitments with La Sportiva, I had to do some of these Cirque Series races. And so it ended up being, and then it's like a lot of traveling involved as well. So it became a bit more like trying to fit in as much training as I could between races. Um, so I don't feel like my training was very structured leading into the world champs. But a better example would be when I was training for the Canyons 100K. I would just do a long run every Sunday. That was usually time was the metric we would use. So between 3 and like 5 hours was typical. Um, and so, yeah, we would pick like an intensity, and usually that was race intensity. So pushing the climbs a little bit more than usual was pretty common. Um, and yeah, it was a little like both Jeff and Adam have coaches, and I'm self-coached, so I would kind of just sort of piggyback off of what they were doing on a Sunday long run. But the general consensus was that we were just running for, say, like 4 hours, and a couple hours in the middle would be a little more up tempo. So yeah.
You mentioned a little bit like some uphill threshold. Are you doing any speed work that's a little more fast or intensive than that?
Um, yeah, so I would do like one session every week where I would do a combination of like a climb threshold and then a flat threshold. Um, Basically stole the idea from Killian Jornet. So we would do like a 2,000 foot climb up Mount Sentinel, which is like the local training grounds here. Um, do that hard, and then jog back down and then do like a flatter type session, like maybe 5 by 4 minutes or something. And I'll give you an example, like a workout that I did maybe 2 weeks before Canyon's 100K that had me really confident. I did a Sentinel Hill climb, so 2,000 foot climb in like just under 20 minutes. Or maybe it was like right at about 20 minutes. So the gap on that is like 5 10s, 5 20s, something like that. And then I jogged back down and then did a 6 mile tempo run at, I think it was like 5:40, working down to like 5:30s. And that was like the best session that I had leading into Canyons. So yeah, that was that. And then in combination with the long runs, was like a really good week of training for me. Um,
Right.
so yeah, there's like, I wouldn't even call it speed work because anytime like in what we know is speed work, but speed work for me now is like if I run under 6 minutes per mile, I'm like turning the gears much faster than I ever do. So that's speed work for me now. If I do like tempo or something where I'm running under 6 minute pace, that feels like I'm flying these days. Yeah.
What's something in running you're excited about? Like goals or just things you're enjoying in the sport right now?
Um. Ooh. I'm really excited about. Well, personally, I'm excited to race up in Alaska. Uh, there's a race called Mount Marathon that I got into out in Seward. So I'll do that. And I think that's something I'm really excited for at the moment. And there's a on August 2nd this year, there's a race in Washington that's now part of the Skyrunning World Series. So it'll be cool to have a Skyrunning World Series race in the US. So I'm excited about that. Um, and then I don't know. I mean, the sport is like rapidly changing, so it's kind of interesting to follow it and see uh, how popular like the UTMB series has become. And I've like debated whether or not to do a UTMB race to then try to get into OCC or something like that. But that doesn't excite me. That's just kind of the natural progression that I think the sport has taken. That if I were to remain a professional athlete, that's the path I would probably have to take eventually. But for right now, I'm just most stoked on these big mountain races that exist. And yeah, I'm excited to go over to Europe again this year and race on the Skyrunning World Series circuit. And yeah, then just enjoying the summer in the States while I'm here and uh, running in the mountains and yeah, everything else. So yeah.
Right. No, I mean, like I said, if you're listening, go follow Jackson on Strava. I really enjoy following some of the stuff you do, and I always kind of like learn some things about some different parts of the sport I didn't know about. So I've got a question. So over the years you've sacrificed a lot for running. I think like a lot of runners who are, like all in, you've bet on yourself plenty of times. What advice would you give to someone who was in this like a similar position as you were when you were leaving college running, where things didn't quite work out the way you wanted?
Yeah, I think my high school coach once told us that if you wanted to be a professional runner, you had to take a vow of poverty. And that's something that's always sort of stuck with me. And I think that's changed a lot, especially in trail running. Now the pipeline of going from collegiate running to being a professional trail runner is a lot easier. But that, didn't exist when I was getting into the sport. Um, I think the best advice I could give is just to do it for the right reasons. If you're passionate about it, you should just go for it. Never expect to make any money because it took me, oh man, it took me probably 8 years of trail running until I started to financially benefit from it. But that's totally fine. Like that's when I got into the sport, it wasn't because I wanted to make money or anything. It's what I wanted to do. And I lived in the back of my car for many summers. I rented a garage in Alamosa for $100 a month. Like I just kind of did whatever I could. I worked like the worst jobs imaginable. Um, yeah, I just like always the number one priority was being able to do the thing that I loved the most, which was running in the mountains in the summer. And I just made it work. I've definitely had times where I've like really struggled in the fall financially, like have taken, or had taken like 3 months off completely just to go run in the mountains. And then come October, I'm like, oh, all of a sudden rent's due and I have like $200 in my bank account or something. So, um, yeah, you just have to accept that that might be the reality sometimes, but it's so worth it if you have the passion for it. And even better, if you can find a job where it's flexible enough that you can train and race, that's sort of the best gig. I was lucky to fall into when I was living in Colorado, I was working for Kyle Masterson, doing tours of the Great Sand Dunes National Park. Um, and that was just awesome. I got to be outside all the time and then I could train in a place that I loved, and then show other people that area as well. So, but then I moved to Montana and luckily started to get a bit more financial support from sponsors and whatnot. But yeah, just yeah, the only advice I can really give is just do it for the right reasons. Because if you're doing it with the intention of making money, you're definitely doing it for the wrong reasons. But it is becoming more viable now. Yeah, especially with not only sponsors but races are starting to up their prize purse. Um, so yeah, companies are sort of seeing the value in the sport, in the professional side of the sport as well, I think. So yeah. Um, so that's actually kind of an exciting part of trail running right now, at least, is the growth and the financial support that comes with it. Yeah.
No, that's thank you. That's a great answer. I like that. Um, who's a who is a runner that you admire, and or maybe just a person that you admire and why?
Um, I think a person that I hmm, really admire. I mean, it kind of seems to change all the time. Um, just like you admire someone and then you meet them and you're like, oh, you're kind of lame. um, but like someone who I think like Anton Krupicka would be a good example of someone who he has this style and ethic and he's stuck really strongly to it his entire career, for better or worse. And I appreciate that. Um, Another person is this guy, Jack Kinzel. He's more known in the sort of FKT speed record realm. Um, he has records like on Denali and Mount Rainier. He's very accomplished, but he's always been really outspoken in the sport. He still like refuses sponsors. And I think he's a good example of someone who does it for the right reasons and he does it at a really high level. Um, yeah, I think I value anyone who has their own personality and opinions, and I really dislike it when there are trail runners who kind of just seemingly sell their soul to um, please their sponsors or whatever. Like, I think it'll be hard for those people to look fondly on their careers in like 20 years and be like, yeah, I was doing it for the right reasons or whatever. But I think someone like, yeah, Anton can look back and say they did everything for the most part for the right reasons and stay true to themselves. And I think it also comes across pretty clearly, even on social media, when you're being disingenuine. So I think people can see that as well. But yeah, those guys. And then maybe someone like Adam Peterman in town. He's like someone I train with a lot, but he's also just a really nice person. And um, yeah, he hasn't let, winning Western States or the world champs get to his head. He's very liberal and just, yeah, fun person to be around. So yeah, but there are so many people like that in the sport as well. That's not like a rarity. So that's really nice. Yeah.
Right. Right. Awesome. Speaking of social media and all that, you're you're always pretty genuine. I enjoy like seeing stuff that you put online. How can people follow you? Like, what's the best way to see what you're up to, and see what you're doing, what you're excited about?
I would usually say Strava, but my watch actually just broke. So I'm using phone Strava at the moment, sort of on and off. Um, yeah, I guess, yeah, Strava would be the best place, the place where I post the most often. Um, in the summers, I post a lot more on Instagram, but probably a bit of a boring person to follow right now if you wanted to get the lowdown on what I'm up to. But yeah, yeah, probably Strava, just my name. I none
Okay,
of my profile photos are this like card that my mom sent me for my birthday years ago. There's just this like little guy on a summit saying "yay." So don't look for my face. Just look for that little guy on a summit. That's me.
sweet. Yeah,
Yeah.
follow Jackson Cole on Strava. Like I said, one of my favorite follows. So,
Thanks.
what upcoming what's next for you? Races? What are you targeting next?
Um. Well, actually, in the near future, I'm actually headed to New Zealand. Just to go home for Christmas. But I'm doing a bike trip. Where I'm gonna bike the do like a bike packing trip down the South Island with the intent of climbing a few peaks down there. So sort of a combination of mountaineering and bike packing. Um, so that's what I'm looking forward to the most coming up. And then I don't really have anything planned outside of that until like June or July when I'll start racing on the skyrunning circuit. Um, and one of the first races of my season will be, I think, potentially in France. I'll race Sky Race de Methacines, which that's actually in May. But yeah, that'll be like the first race I do. But yeah, in the meantime, I'm just thinking about this and trying to plan for this trip that I'm headed out on in New Zealand. That should be pretty wild. So yeah,
Sweet, sweet. Yeah, I'll be waiting for whenever you get cell service and upload some of those
yeah, yeah.
some of the
I'll get
rides.
some cool photos.
All right. Thanks, Jackson. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time and sitting down.
Yeah,
You're
thanks. It's fun to chat with someone who knows me and is also excited about trail running and everything else. But yeah, more so, it's fun to talk about Adams State days and
yeah.
reminisce a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah, we could spend hours on that.
yeah,
I wish yeah, I wish we could. Um but yeah, you're on top of being a good friend, you're one of my favorite runners. So I'm always just super proud of how you're doing and always glad to see you run.
yeah. Likewise. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks, dude.
Cool.
We'll catch you around.
All right. Okay.